Hey everyone, Logan Hertz with Hazeltine LLC. I had a recent interview with Caleb Guilliams, who is a fellow traveler in the space, does great work, has a lot of content. And in our interview, we talked a little bit about the Nelson Nash Institute and we talked about the infinite banking footprint. I want to talk about the infinite banking footprint. I want to talk about the Nelson Nash Institute and want to talk candidly about how can we best spread the message of infinite banking, support each other, and communicate it. So I shared briefly in that interview my experience with the Nelson Nash Institute. So for those of you who don't know, I'll include links below. The Nelson Nash Institute promotes infinite banking. They're probably the foremost organization out there that promotes infinite banking. Nelson Nash is considered the sort of discoverer or creator of infinite banking. He wrote the book Becoming Your Own Banker. There was and is a need for maybe some kind of organization to promote and support it because infinite banking is its own thing. It's a specific use case for whole life insurance. And so they saw a genuine need to support infinite banking agents to promote the message and give people a way to do it the right way. And that's how that organization was founded. I think it was founded fairly recently. It hasn't been around that long. I joined the Nelson Nash Institute and I took their test to become like officially certified as an authorized IBC practitioner, as they call it. I became one. I was listed on their website and then I got kicked out. The reason why I got kicked out has nothing to do with infinite banking, believe it or not. At the time, I had two different businesses going on. I had my infinite banking business and then I also had an investment newsletter that I ran separately. And I was trying to publish an ad on someone else's podcast. And in that ad, I happened to mention Bob Murphy because I had two different ads side by side. One was infinite banking, one was the investment newsletter. And Bob Murphy, who at the time was one of the leaders of the Nelson Nash Institute, got wind of this advertising copy, didn't like it, and sent me an incredibly angry, incredibly ranty, unprofessional email that was basically a knee-jerk emotional reaction. And it was pretty traumatic to receive that at the time from someone that is supposed to be your friend, that you think is like on the inside, on a subject that had nothing to do whatsoever with infinite banking. Okay. So and by the way, this advertisement had not yet even published. And so me trying to be diplomatic, I said, okay, if this makes you angry, I'm okay not publishing it. Or, hey, how would you like me to adjust the verbiage? It hasn't gone to press yet. I can change it however you want, even though I thought he was being totally unreasonable, and because he was being totally unreasonable. And there was no discussion. They were not willing to talk to me about it at all. They kicked me out and there was no adjudication. They weren't even willing to talk to me about it, right? So this was a clear instance of bullying. At least they had the decency to give me back my money because they admitted I'd done nothing wrong. I hadn't violated any of their rules. I wasn't doing anything wrong. So they gave me back my money. But this is unfortunately the sort of pattern of behavior that we see repeated by the leaders of the Nelson Nash Institute, where unfortunately their mission seems to be more about controlling the narrative and controlling what they call their IBC practitioners, is making sure you do it their way. And there are both written and unwritten rules, right? It's not just here are the expectations, you need to meet these expectations. There are also unwritten rules where you get manipulated into doing various things that aren't officially part of the rule book. And this was one example of it, because the reason I was kicked out had absolutely nothing to do with infinite banking. I remember when I first started in the industry, I was learning from various people that I found online. And I started questioning why, after I discovered the Nelson Nash Institute, why was it that these guys who I thought were some of the leading lights, some of the most creative thinkers out there who are really doing great work, none of them were members of the Nelson Nash Institute? Why was that? I didn't know. And then I found out why, right? Probably because they didn't like being controlled. Creative thinkers, entrepreneurial types generally don't like being controlled. So again, I want to mention that. So unfortunately, what the Nelson Nash Institute has become is a compliance department where basically you have to comply and do it their way. That's unfortunately what they have become. They do also promote infinite banking. They do purport to support their infinite banking practitioners. But I think a lot of what they do ends up being controlling them and playing this constant whack-a-mole game of when they see someone promoting infinite banking in the wrong way or in a way that they don't approve of, they want to smack them down. And that is, I think, counterproductive. Now, is the problem real? Yes. There are people out there who misuse the language of infinite banking and pull the bait and switch on people and things like that. And that's a real problem. Yeah. Yeah. But this isn't the right way to address it. I also really don't like how they have used the trademark. I believe they've now trademarked the phrase, the infinite banking concept. And basically, to me, that's a very monopolistic, anti-free thinking sort of thing to do, is to say, we now have a monopoly on this word, this phrase. And now anyone who tries to use it in a way that we don't agree with is going to get beat. Again, it's a form of bullying is what it is. So that I also don't agree with. If you want to make it clear that this is what the infinite banking concept we believe stands for, this is how Nelson promoted it, and we don't support this other way of doing it, that's fine, as long as you're not then bullying those other people, right? Make it clear where you stand, make it clear you don't approve of them, make it clear that Nelson wouldn't approve of this and why it's wrong. No problem. But don't trademark the phrase and use it as a hammer to beat people up. That I'm not a fan of. That's just bullying. And let's acknowledge something, okay? Let's be honest. Nelson Nash was not a good writer, okay? Nelson Nash was like a brilliant mathematician. He's brilliant in his own way, phenomenal. He discovered, conceptualized, understood the infinite banking concept. And then he wrote Becoming Your Own Bank, okay? And let's be brutally honest, okay? That book is not the best written book. And a lot of the misconceptions out there around infinite banking, or I shouldn't say a lot, some of the misconceptions around infinite banking come from Nelson's own book. Not because Nelson ever actually said them. He didn't. He didn't approve of them. But because that book is poorly written, it leaves you with certain impressions. I'll give you an example, okay? Some people will tell you you can get rich buying cars with infinite banking, right? Which is ridiculous, right? You cannot get rich buying depreciating assets. That's ridiculous. And Nelson never said that in his book. He never said that. But he leaves you with that impression because the book is poorly written. When you go through his example of equipment financing, he shows you two different examples. In example one, I think he finances one truck using his policy. In example two, I think he finances 5 trucks, right? And you end up with a lot more money. And so it leaves you with the impression that, oh, because I bought more trucks, therefore I ended up with more money. But that's not what's going on. The reason why you end up with more money is because you paid more in premium into your whole life policy. That's what drives the additional performance. Okay. So did Nelson say you can get rich buying depreciating assets? No. Did he say you got richer because you bought more trucks? No. But because the book is poorly written and poorly laid out, it leaves you with that impression. So I remember Nelson talking about this, how he said, look, if you don't understand it, then read that again. And if you still don't understand it, give me a call. I'll explain it to you. And getting real frustrated. I'm like, Nelson, start behaving like a grown-up. Instead of getting angry with those other people and saying, hey, you just don't get it, read it again. Maybe the problem is not that other person being a moron. Maybe the problem is you and your inability to articulate the concept in a clear manner. Maybe that's the problem. And I think it's not just Nelson Nash. I think it's in the wider infinite banking footprint. We, as a community, I include myself in this, by the way, I'm including myself, do not do a good job of explaining the concept, right? I don't think Nelson was trying to mislead people. I don't think he said anything in his book that was untrue about infinite banking. It's just that he wasn't very clear or lucid in how he communicated it. And so it naturally led to misconceptions. And we've got to be honest about this, or we're never going to make progress. We've got to be honest. A lot of the misconceptions come from officially authorized IBC practitioners and Nelson Nash himself, not because they necessarily say anything that's untrue, but because they do a poor job of explaining it. Okay. And this is true, not just with infinite banking, but in general, the people who succeed the most in business are not the people who understand and explain an abstract concept the best. It's the people who are the best at marketing. And so when you look at some of the biggest infinite banking people out there, they're successful because they're good at marketing. They're not so good at explaining the abstract concept. And they cannot tell the difference between good communication and poor communication. I saw this a lot in consulting. People who are not good communicators, they can't tell the difference, right? Like someone who doesn't have a very well-trained musical ear, they can't tell the difference between good music and bad music. It's just not, they can't tell. And so I've had multiple people because I'm constantly saying, you know what, we don't do a good job of explaining it. People say, oh yeah, this guy, he does an amazing job of explaining it. Check this out. And I look at, I'm like, this is embarrassing. Like, this isn't just bad. This is embarrassing. So a lot of people in the infinite banking footprint just simply cannot see the problem because they themselves are not good communicators, or they have kind of fallen into this cultish worship of Nelson Nash where we're no longer allowed to criticize him. We can no longer be honest about his work. The infinite banking concept is brilliant. Nelson Nash was a brilliant man, but understanding and implementing an abstract concept and explaining it to an intelligent layman, those are two different skills. Those are two very different skills. You might be phenomenal at playing a sport. That doesn't mean you're good at coaching it. Those are two different skills. Okay. So Nelson Nash was not a good writer. He was not a good communicator. And that comes through in his work, right? Again, let's just be honest about this. This to me is obvious. I'm not saying anything in my mind that's controversial. If we're being honest with ourselves, we have to acknowledge that many of the misconceptions about infinite banking are self-inflicted because we in the infinite banking footprint do not do a good job of explaining it. And that's what leads to a lot of the misconceptions. Not all of them, but all of them. Okay. So, but let's just be honest about this. Unfortunately, when you look at the Nelson Nash Institute, they have become kind of a cult that worships Nelson Nash and becoming your own banker. And so no criticism is ever allowed. No honest observation is ever allowed. Nelson was completely infallible, right? And not only is everything he said true, apparently it can never be said better than how he said it, right? Some people refer to becoming your own banker as the source of infinite banking. That's not the source, okay? This predated Nelson Nash, right? Nelson Nash discovered something. He didn't invent it. It didn't come out of that book, okay? Did Sir Isaac Newton invent gravity? No, he discovered it and he wrote about it, but he is not the source of gravity. So no, becoming your own banker is not the source of the infinite banking concept. It's an idea. It's an idea that came before Nelson and lives after Nelson. And by the way, that's a compliment to Nelson. I'm not putting him down. I'm complimenting him. He discovered something bigger than himself, which is why it didn't die with Nelson, right? We still have it today. So again, I think many of the people in the infinite banking footprint are not good at explaining an abstract concept. And they cannot tell the difference between a good explanation and a poor explanation. And so they can't even see the problem. And this is true in business across the board. The biggest problems are the ones that you cannot see. Those are the biggest problems, the ones that you cannot see. If you can see a problem, then it tends to improve, right? Then it tends to get. So we've got to first acknowledge that there's a problem. And as long as we treat Nelson Nash like he's the Messiah and becoming your own banker like it's gospel, then we can't ever acknowledge this problem. Okay. Some of the members of the Nelson Nash Institute, and I have to put this out there, whether they realize it or not, they don't realize it, but they end up blaspheming quite a lot. They call themselves Christians, many of them. And I'm kind of reminded of a dream of St. Jerome, where he was asked by a judge in a dream, what religion are you? He said, oh, I'm a Christian. And the judge said, no, you're not. You're a Ciceronian. That's who you really, his ideas mean more to you than the ideas of Christ. St. Jerome realized it was true, right? Kind of the same thing here. It's like, are you really Christians or are you Nelson Nashites? Right? I mean, whose ideas really take a higher place in your heart than, is it the ideas of the Bible or the ideas found in becoming your own banker, right? And so unfortunately what happens is Nelson is your Messiah, becoming your own banker is your gospel, and the Nelson Nash Institute is your church, unfortunately. The infinite banking concept is a brilliant financial strategy. I believe in it. This is what I do for a living, but it's not my religion. It's not that. So again, I remember a guy, I was talking to him about this and he offered to make some introductions for me. He said, but first you need to explain the infinite banking concept in a way that is crisp and visual and clear. That was multiple years ago. I still have not gone back to him and asked for referrals because I still don't have it. I haven't seen it from Nelson. I haven't seen it from any of the officially authorized infinite banking practitioners. I haven't seen it from myself. I haven't seen it from anyone in the footprint that I like or don't like. Doesn't matter. Some do a better job than others, but I have never seen it well explained in a clear, crisp visual format. It does not exist. So I still have not gone back to that guy and asked for introductions. So I want to be clear. I'm including myself in this criticism, But I think many of the people in the footprint are not good communicators. And so they can't see that there's a problem. Okay. So there's a saying in psychology, you become what you hate. You become what you hate, right? And let me give the Nelson Nash Institute credit. I'm actually positive on this, so it won't sound that way because I'm engaging in some constructive criticism, but I am positive on it. I would like to still be a member, honestly, because I still think there's good things, but I can't be a member and remain independent at the same time. The problem, right? So we get attacked a lot, right? We get beat up unfairly. We get called a lot of names, right? We get attacks both from outside and inside the industry, right? And so I understand why the Nelson Nash Institute does what it does. But unfortunately, what happens is when you get bullied, sometimes you end up becoming a bully. That's unfortunately the case, right? And I think that's kind of what has happened with the Nelson Nash Institute is they have become what they hate, right? Those compliance departments that are always beating us up over arbitrary rules, which have nothing to do with the 10 Commandments or true ethics. It's all about following Wall Street's rules, right? And making you feel guilty because you broke one of Wall Street's rules, right? You're taking money away from Wall Street. That's not allowed, right? And unfortunately, the Nelson Nash Institute has sort of become like those compliance departments, where now instead of trying to encourage and promote the infinite banking concept, they're more on the negative side where they're trying to beat people up and punish people who don't do infinite banking in the way that they think is the right way. And whether they're right or wrong, still the way they're going about it is the wrong, right? So, in the idea of having this stamp of approval, like you're now an officially authorized member of the infinite banking cult, right? That to me is totally opposed to independent thinking, right? It's kind of like when you see people who they wear their titles, their credentials on their sleeve, like I'm a CFP, I'm a CPA. That's how you know they're intellectually bankrupt, right? If you had a good idea, that good idea stands on its own. Infinite banking stands on its own. Doesn't need the Nelson Nash Institute, doesn't need any official authorization. Right? If you have a good idea or if you have proven results, that stands on its own and it's way more important than any title or any credential you might have. So I am not looking for approval from any third party, right? Which is why even when I was a member, I never put in my email signature, I'm officially authorized. Well, that's just saying I'm owned by somebody else. Somebody else is pulling my strings. Somebody else is telling me what to do. And I'm not an independent thinker, right? If you want to be an independent thinker, you cannot be looking for approval from other people. Now, yes, unfortunately, sometimes you're legally required to get certain things. There can be reasons for doing that. I understand. But you always want to maintain your independence, right? You always want to maintain being an independent thinker, right? So we shouldn't be looking for approval from the insurance companies or the financial sector. We don't want to cozy up to them. Remember, infinite banking came from outside the insurance industry, and that's important. Being an outsider has a lot of value. I learned this from being a consultant. One of the biggest values I add as a consultant is just the fact that I'm not an insider. And if I become an insider, I lose all my value as a consultant. Valuable. If you have people working for you, they can be very valuable, but they cannot provide the same service that a consultant can provide because a consultant comes from outside. So if we in the infinite banking footprint want to keep doing what we're doing, we cannot cozy up to the insurance companies. We cannot cozy up to the financial sector. We cannot be seeking approval from them. Okay. We have now partner with them. Yes. I view the insurance companies as very valuable business partners and I want to keep doing business with them, but I don't work for them. I'm not seeking their approval. And when they start giving me their condescending pat on the head of approval, that's when I'll be worried that I'm doing something wrong, right? I'm here to act in my client's best interest, not the insurance companies. Okay. And so because we're outsiders, we can do a good job of holding the insurance companies accountable to their clients, not to Wall Street, to their clients. Right. So again, believe it or not, I'm still positive on the Nelson Nash Institute. They promote infinite banking, which I believe in. I definitely got value from being there for sure. Mostly from networking with other infinite banking agents and seeing how they did it was very valuable. So if you are new in the business or if you are not that well established, I think it's absolutely worth considering joining. Just don't hitch your wagon to them too much and don't ever wear the stamp of I'm officially authorized because at some point you're going to outgrow them, right? At some point, if you want to truly be independent, you're going to lose that stamp of approval, right? Unless you want to just do it 100% their way all the way. Okay. But I wouldn't do that. And again, I want to give them credit. Like the problem they're identifying is real. Okay. And the goals they have, I agree with. I just think they're going about it in kind of a heavy handed way rather than a more constructive way. Right. And of course, I think sharing my own personal experience comes across as pretty genuine too. I'll throw something else out there. They tried to start a mentorship program. I don't know if that's still going on, but I want to give them credit because that's also something that's needed, right? It's really hard to find a good mentor when you get into this business. And you need a mentor. It needs to be the right fit personality wise. And you need a mentor who actually does what you do. And infinite banking is its own specialty. It's not generic whole life insurance, right? So I'll give them credit for trying that. And I actually was assigned a mentor. And that particular mentor was Justin Nowlin with Nowlin Associates. And I remember at that time, I still had this investment newsletter. And I was talking about him with a few things and how I had this investment newsletter. And he said, "Oh, can you show that to me, please? Can you show me your investment newsletter?" And I was like, no, I charge my clients $25,000 for that. I'm not just going to show it to you. And he's like, "Oh, that's the scarcity mentality. You've got the scarcity mentality." Now I didn't say this to him, but I'm like, "No, you're being a bully, plain and simple, right? You're trying to extract this investment newsletter out of me that I'm charging my clients $25,000 for. It would be wrong for me to just give it to you for free. That would be unethical. That would be totally wrong, right? You're just being a bully. You're being a bully, plain and simple." I also think too, if I had given it to him, he would have gotten zero value out of it, right? You see this time and again, right? People have a hard time measuring value. It's a hard thing to do, right? So if I had given him that newsletter for free, he would not have gotten any value out of it. He wouldn't have gotten it. He wouldn't have understood it. It would have done nothing for him. Kind of like people who think, "Oh, I'll go take a snapshot of Warren Buffett's portfolio and then I'll be a billionaire like Warren Buffett." Or when you also when you present people with the infinite banking concept, they don't see the value in it, right? Not because there is no value in it, but because they can't see it, right? Likewise, Justin Nolan, Nowlin, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sure he wouldn't have seen any value in my investment newsletter. Not because there isn't any value in it. There's tremendous value in it. My subscribers did very well, but because he can't see it. Right? And so this, again, it's a pattern, right? This is a clear instance of bullying. You're accusing me of having the scarcity mentality. I'm not the parasite who's trying to extract something out of somebody else for free, right? When I'm charging my clients $25,000 for it. Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of just my stream of consciousness explanation, how I view the Nelson Nash Institute, my experience with them, and why I am involuntarily no longer a member of the Nelson Nash Institute. So they have become a cult of worship of Nelson Nash and becoming your own banker. And they are trying to control other people who do infinite banking rather than trying to promote and support the message of infinite banking. So that was a lot. I know I said a lot. Everyone, Logan Hertz here with Hazeltine LLC. Just wanted to add a coda to this video to give you some of the context. First of all, I had actually recorded this video with another person. That person subsequently asked to be edited out of the video. That should tell you everything you need to know. It makes it more important that I publish this video because it shows that there is very clear bullying going on from the Nelson Nash Institute, right? When you feel like you have to walk on eggshells and you cannot say certain things because you're afraid of what somebody else might do to you, it's very clear that somebody else is a bully. I wanted to add one more thing on Justin Nowlin and his company. They also, another thing that they did is much after I had left, they actually held my contract hostage. I was trying to get contracted with the same insurance carrier through a different agency with someone that I actually wanted to work with. And this was much later. And they actually just held my contract hostage. And that was totally spiteful of them. There was nothing to be gained. I had not placed any business with them. I hadn't talked to them in a long time. That they still had the contract, but we clearly were not working together. And so there was really no reason for them to do that except out of spite. So they held my contract hostage. So I was not able to get contracted through that insurance carrier with this other agency that I actually wanted to work with until later, until that contract had expired. So that was just another instance of their bullying and just showing the pattern of bullying. Again, getting back to what I said earlier, this my counterpart who I recorded the video with and who actually had a lot of interesting things to say, kind of agreeing with me and adding his own color commentary. The fact that he asked me to edit him out, that really tells you all that you need to know. Because quite frankly, I wasn't sure whether I was going to publish this video, but after he made that decision, it was very clear to me that, okay, now I need to publish this video. Okay. And quite frankly, I understand why from his perspective. It's really more of a cost benefit analysis. Same thing happened with Caleb Guilliams lately. I don't know if you saw that, but he received a cease and desist letter from Ray Curtis. Ray Curtis has this MPI strategy. And Caleb had a guest on and they talked about it and they were critical of his MPI strategy. And so Curtis had his attorneys send Caleb a letter and Caleb talked about it on his YouTube channel, which I commend you for that, Caleb. But I think at the end of the day, Caleb decided to take down the video just because of the cost benefit analysis, right? I mean, it's just not worth going through that process of having to fight it out in court or what have you, right? It's kind of like when the cop pulls you over for no reason at all, and your rights are being violated, it, but it's just not worth the money, the time, the hassle to fight it. So most people just give in, pay the cop his ransom, whatever, right? Admit to doing something they didn't do, pay a few $100 and move on with their lives, right? That's what we do. Because if you isolate just that one incident, the cost benefit analysis, it doesn't make sense to fight it in court, right? It makes more sense from just a money perspective to just pay the extortion and be done with it. But that's what the bullies count on, right? That's what the bullies count on because they know in every individual instance, the cost benefit analysis says you should just give the bully his money, give him what he wants, and move on with your life. But of course, collectively, over time, that just gives the bully more and more and more power, right? And then he takes that as permission to keep doing what he's doing, right? And so while I understand why that person wanted to be edited out of the video, quite frankly, I did lose a little bit of respect for him for making that decision. So obviously I edited him out. I respect his decision. If he doesn't want to be included, that's fine. But I did lose a little bit of respect for him because of that decision. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of what made it clear to me that I do need to publish this video. It's a troubling trend. It's very chilling to see what this does to free speech. It's very chilling when you see good people that you respect who have good, insightful things to say, deciding to be silent because it just doesn't make sense because of the cost benefit analysis. I'm not saying he's doing it out of cowardice. I'm not saying that. Just again, similar to Caleb, it's just the cost benefit analysis. You decide, it's just not worth it. Right. Right. So now I also want to say I fully understand there are much bigger bullies out there, especially when we're talking about the financial industry. There's much bigger problems out there from Wall Street, from the powers that be, et cetera. The powers that be in the financial sector are way more powerful and way more dangerous than the Nelson Nash Institute. Understand that. I understand that. Okay. And so I understand why the Nelson Nash Institute does what they do because there are much bigger enemies out there. And it's a natural psychological reaction when we who promote the infinite banking concept, who promote whole life insurance, who promote alternative strategies that are actually in our clients' interests, as opposed to the Wall Street strategies, which are not so much in the client's best interest, we get beat up a lot, right? We get beat up a lot, we get attacked, etc. And the temptation is then to lash out, right? And to become like the people who bully us, right? It's hard to resist that temptation, but we have to rise above that and not become bullies, right? Those who get bullied oftentimes become bullies, right? But just because there are bigger bullies out there doesn't mean I'm going to make excuses for the smaller bullies, right? So when members of the Nelson Nash Institute, like Bob Murphy, who's no longer with them, Carlos Lara and David Stearns bully me and I am a victim of their bullying, I'm going to call them out for it. I think as I get older, this is something that I have less tolerance for, and I see more of it, more of the bullying and manipulative behavior among grown-ups, right? Because when there's a bully on the playground, when it happens in high school, it's more apparent, right? Grown-ups, when grown-ups bully or get bullied, it's more subtle, right? It's more manipulative, right? It's not so overt. So again, I understand why they behave this way because they've been unjustly beaten up quite a bit, and I sympathize with them. And I believe in their message of the infinite banking concept. And if I hadn't been kicked out, honestly, I'd probably still be a member. I would probably still be a member today. And the unfortunate thing is, I was kicked out for something that had nothing to do with the infinite banking concept. There was no discussion whatsoever, right? The way they not only was what they did unjust, the way they handled it was totally unjust. It's like if you're going to fire an employee, you do it in person, right? You do it in person, or you at least get on a call to tell them if it's a remote employee and you can't meet them in person, right? You don't send them an email and tell them you're fired, right? Well, that's what they did with me, right? They sent me an email, right? To which I responded and said, "Hey, I'm willing to address this thing you don't like. Fine. It hasn't even published yet. I won't publish it." Right. But they weren't even okay with that. And I was like, "Can we discuss this?" No, no discussion. I was kicked out with no discussion, no adjudication. That's just wrong, period. That's unethical. If you're going to make that kind of a decision, just like if you're going to fire an employee, the right thing to do is to deliver that message in person or at least over the phone, right? At least a Zoom call, something like that, right? Deliver that message in person. Certainly, we had to do a Zoom interview before I was admitted to the Nelson Nash Institute, right? There was a process that I went through where they interviewed me. I went past their test. I believe at the time I scored the highest anyone had ever scored on their test. I think I got a 99 out of 100, which is the highest anyone had gotten, at least at that point, right? So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I'm always going to call out and I'm never going to excuse bullying. Now, yes, I know there are much bigger bullies out there. There are much worse actors. I understand. But this is the bully I have in front of me. This is the bully that I personally was victimized by. And I think it's important to stand up to them. And again, the sad thing is, I support their goal of promoting the infinite banking concept. I support their stated goal of supporting and mentoring and nurturing infinite banking agents. I think that's great. I think that's great. I disagree with their strategy of trying to control rather than support their infinite banking agents and those in the footprint who talk about the infinite banking concept. I don't think it's the right thing to do to trademark the infinite banking concept as a phrase and then go out there and try and punish those who use that phrase in a way that you don't like. Probably better just call them out. And I invite David Stearns, Carlos Lara, Bob Murphy, the current leadership, current membership of the Nelson Nash Institute to come on my show and talk about this. I'm happy to have a conversation. I would like to keep the communication lines open. I never want to burn any bridges. I never want to make any enemies unnecessarily. So if you want to come on my show and talk about it, I'm happy to have you on the show. There will probably be actually another part to this video, which will be published as well. But I kind of feel morally obliged to put this message out there. Hopefully, probably it'll just be ignored. That's fine, and then I can get back to doing what I wanted to do anyway, which is, promoting the infinite banking concept, promoting whole life insurance, growing my business, doing all the great things I want to do with my clients. But if the Nelson Nash Institute membership or leadership would like to come onto my show to discuss it, I'm happy to have that conversation. So I hope this was helpful. We'll talk again soon. Bye bye.